say you're fine, but I can see right through. You're holding your secrets for way too long. This can't keep going on. With every lie, they keep on hurting you, getting away with everything they do. This can't keep going on. No, we're gonna find them, and I'm gonna fight for you. They better start hiding. We'll be running with the lions, lions. We'll be running with the lions, lions. They can't run, they can't hide. We won't stop until they're down. We'll be running with the lions, lions.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Gloves Off. I am your host, DrKalpana.Unbound, and I'm so glad to have you guys here today. I actually just got back from Europe I think it's been 4 or 5 days now, probably 4 days ago, and it was an amazing trip. So the exciting part is that the person that I was traveling with, his name is Paolo Wakham. He's our guest today, and I met him at the University Club. It's probably been close to a year now, actually. And we met at a new member event. We got to be friendly. We got to seeing each other more at the club and whatnot. And then there was an opportunity that came up, and he was going to Europe to scout out some areas for this upcoming cruise. He's the sommelier on this luxury wine and food cruise that's coming up in September. So he asked if there was anybody interested in accompanying him, and kind of put a text message out to several people, to which, of course, I responded and said, I'm in. I love the idea of exploring different towns and just scouting out these places for a cruise and whatnot. So I was very excited about the opportunity. So the trip was really fun. First, we started off in Portugal. So not Porto. I'm still a little jet lagged, by the way. So started off in Portugal. Then we went to northern Spain, Gijón, and then we parted ways. And he went to Bilbao, and then back to Lisbon, and then I went to Italy after that, and then flew home. So it was a 2-week trip, and it was pretty amazing. So one of the things we're going to really be doing today is talking about that trip and just some pearls about travel, wine, and the fun moments that we experienced. But before we get into that, obviously want to thank our sponsors. So one of our sponsors, Business Done Better. If you own a business and you have all those little things to do that are just troublesome, graphic design, flyers that need to be made, social media stuff, any of those kind of things, anything that's automated, email flows, whatnot. Business Done Better has been my go-to for all of those things. And it has been such a blessing for me just because, well, I'm good at a lot of things, but that's not one of them. So they help me get all those things done that I'm not very good at. So I'm just going to play a quick video.
Every day empowering others, teaching them to value themselves, showing them how to invest in their growth, guiding them to build stronger futures. But here's the question that no one's asking you. Who's empowering you? And while you're pouring everything into your client's success, your own business is running on empty. Because if you're still tracking client progress in spreadsheets, if you're still losing leads in overcrowded inboxes, still piecing together workflows that break when you need them most, then the hard truth is that you've built a business that depends entirely on your constant attention, and that's just not sustainable. You deserve tools that match your commitment, that work just as hard as you do, that amplify your impact instead of limit it. So think about it. Every time that you send a manual follow-up, every time you have to dig through your emails for client notes, every time you have to juggle between multiple apps to get one thing done, that's all energy that can be spent on transformation. The most successful coaches that we work with have discovered something tremendously powerful. And that is that when they invest in themselves, their impact multiplies because they finally had tools that match their ambition. Now their businesses, they just run like clockwork, right? So leads are captured instantly. Follow-ups happen automatically. Client progress is tracked effortlessly. Everything just works. And not just sometimes, not just when they remember, but all the time. They have literally doubled their client load, they have tripled their revenue, and actually work fewer hours. And not because they worked harder, but because they finally gave themselves permission to be supported. It's time to practice what you preach. Now, if you're ready to empower yourself, the way to empower others is to click below and see the systems that are helping coaches just like you to multiply their impact. Because when you're supported, you can truly soar.
So, as he said, this company was originally started for coaches, which is why I got involved. But they also help so many other individuals and business owners. One of the big things is when you're running a business and you have to go from app to app to log in to get different things done, it really does tax your energy. And I noticed that very quickly. So my business is automated on a CRM, and everything is within one system. So I can access my website, I can access automations on emails, social media posts, and everything from one place. It has made a world of difference. And then I'd also like to talk about our next sponsor, Elevated CPA. So if tax time is coming up and you don't want to do your taxes and you own a small business, always a good idea to get an accountant. All right. So, who's ready to talk about travel, wine, and all kinds of things European? Well, I hope you guys are, because we're about to bring Paolo on and we're going to talk to him about a lot of things. And I have a feeling he's probably drinking wine, so don't be surprised. Hello, Paolo. Welcome to Gloves Off.
Hey, thanks. I miss you. It's been since, when was it? Wednesday night that we parted company at the airport.
Exactly. So I see that you've got your bottle of wine.
Oh,
I only expected that from you. Absolutely.
a little Cote de Rhone.
Yes, nothing wrong with that. I don't really know why I don't have any, but I get tipsy a lot faster than you. You figured that out from our trip.
We did have a lot of fun, and you found out that you like white wine.
I know. That was actually I actually forgotten about that. So Paolo and I have talked a lot about wine, of course, because this is what he does. Oh, actually, before we get into that, you're a second level sommelier. I want to know what that is because I don't know. And
Okay.
I'm sure other people don't know.
So being a sommelier means that you go to school and you learn how to taste wine. The most important thing is how to spit wine out so you don't get drunk, because you're tasting 10 or 20 or 30 wines in one class. But also studying about land, about grape varietals, about clonal selections, about rootstock, about how to trellis and train your grapevines, and about refractometers that help decide the amount of sugar in the grapes and what varietal does well best where, in what region, what aspect of elevation. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that goes on to planting grapes. You have to have dirt under your nails. Then you also have to have a little bit of a science and a little bit of a mad, kind of like Frankenstein thing, where the winemaker and the vineyard manager in concert know that these grapes are ready to pick, because in 3 or 4 or 5 years, we're going to have a bottle of wine like this to drink. And that to me is the magician part. I don't get how they do that.
Me neither. That makes two of us. Well, and it's so interesting because I would say that my understanding of wine and what I like in wine has evolved so much over the years. And one thing that we've talked a lot about is the California wines versus the European wines. And I thought that that was what I liked because that's what I was used to. And you can explain it better about the qualities and the characteristics, but I'll just throw out the general concept. But then when I tried those European wines that you were selecting for us, I really noticed that I enjoyed them a lot more than what I thought I enjoyed in the California wine. So you can explain that concept better for our audience because I'm not going to do it justice.
Well, just in a nutshell, there was a man who's still alive, but he's retired from the business, called Robert Parker Jr. And most people in the wine world would know that name because he came to prominence probably about 30, even maybe 35 years ago. And for some strange reason, he became the guru of what wine was supposed to taste like. And he took the California wine model and ratcheted it up. And he made it oakier and higher alcohol and thicker and richer and more. And unfortunately, for me, it just becomes almost like you have to get a fork and knife and cut the wine because it's so big and thick and full bodied. And also in the United States, unfortunately, there are things that can be added that are not necessarily on the bottle. So we go to Europe and we find out that we've got more old world techniques. We're talking 1,000, 2,000 years old. And we're talking about a grandfather or a great grandfather that planted grapes on this land, that he handed it down to his sons and daughters, mostly sons. And then now, case in point, where I was when I was in Bilbao, I was taken to a winery that the grandsons and the granddaughter, even though she's in her own professional career, so she doesn't have much to do with the winery, but the grandsons are the ones that are the vineyard managers, growing the grapes, picking the grapes with, of course, some hired help. It's all organic, all sustainable, all biodynamic, amazing property in the Rioja region. And there they are. They're making wine the old-fashioned way, but also using modern technology as well.
That is so cool. I kind of missed that. I kind of wish I was there. I would have enjoyed that part too.
Well, you were thieving wine, if you remember, when we left Obidos, just outside of Lisbon, and we met that lovely lady, Joanna,
Yes.
with the dogs and the children that were all dressed up in their costumes for Carnival.
Yes.
And you and I were getting wine thieved out of the barrels, which was really special.
That was very special. That was a really fun part of that trip. And so Obidos, I'm just going to go backwards a little bit. So I'm going to go to the very first day that we got there. We got to Lisbon, and it was, to be honest, I don't remember Lisbon all that much. First of all,
it was cold and rainy and windy.
Cold, rainy, windy. That part I remember, but the rest, it's a little bit of a blur because I was very jet lagged. But then,
well, I have a picture of you with a glass of red wine in your hand.
Yes, that's true. That's true. And maybe that added to the jet lag. But it was a kind of a short stay because then we took off to go to, and we went to Obidos the next day, right? And
Correct. We rented a car and went to Obidos, and it wasn't raining, thank goodness.
Thank
and
goodness.
The reason why we went to Obidos is because, as you had mentioned, I will be the sommelier on board an Oceania cruise this September, which really encompasses the entire Iberian Peninsula and Morocco. And one of the stops is in Lisbon, and we have 2 days in Lisbon. So one day will be a walking tour of Lisbon, and one day we'll be going outside in the countryside. So Obidos is a beautiful old medieval historic town with this gorgeous big stone wall wrapping around the town, which we climbed up, if you remember.
Yes, remember that.
And so we'll go to Obidos. We're going to have a little bite, a little coffee. We're going to walk around the town. I'm going to make some suggestions about where they can go to have a traditional little bite, like those croquetas that we had, the croquettes with that salted cod.
Bacalao.
Yeah, bacalao. And the people were just so gracious, and the food was delicious. And then we walked around and we saw some churches and we saw beautiful flowers. And we had so much fun just kind of getting lost down these little teeny paths. And then we would always find out where we were.
Exactly. And then there was that bookstore too. That was really interesting.
Yes. Yeah, so definitely going to be taking people to all of these different places where we found unique little moments in time, really, because you're going back hundreds and even several hundreds of years into the past to where these people live. And everybody really is trying to do the same thing: a roof over their head, take care of their children, food in their stomach. These days we want gas in our car. It's not rocket science, and yet
Yeah.
it's beautiful to see how other people do pretty much the same thing, but in their own way.
So true, so true. And then after that, we took off because we weren't in Lisbon for, I think, 3 nights,
Just
if I
two
remember.
nights.
2 nights,
And
right?
then we went to
Porto.
Porto.
Yes.
Lisbon is lovely because I went back to Lisbon for 2 days when you were in Italy. And it was sunnier, so I was able to actually experience Lisbon, and I did 25,000 steps in one day.
Wow.
And so it was great. I mean, it was wonderful to get a feel for this very important city. I mean, let's face it, a lot of the ships from the Portuguese and the Spaniards had to go to Lisbon first to go get stocked up before they could go south or north or west. And so I'm glad that I got to see Lisbon more. However, Porto is special.
Yes.
Would you agree?
I would agree. What I loved about it, and we had pretty nice weather, which was perfect. We had great weather. So, I feel the city is so colorful. I loved all the hills, and I felt like we got some really good exercise walking around those hills. That was
Yep.
great. Got really great. Well, Paula got really great exercise because the place we were staying was how many flights of stairs up?
I didn't know that our flat, our apartment, was the only 2 bedroom, and it happened to be on the top floor.
Yes. So we wound up having to go up, I don't know, it was many, many flights of stairs. And steps in Europe are very steep. But towards the end of that 3 days that we were there, I felt that we were getting quite the workout and it was getting less difficult.
Yeah.
Unless you had
Yeah. Thankfully, our lovely, I'm sorry, I can't remember his name, the lovely young man, Fernando, lovely man, and Anna. They're the ones that greeted us. And so he lugged the luggage upstairs, but then I took our luggage downstairs. So,
Yes, it was very, very kind because I don't know, I probably would have been exhausted after that.
No, there's no way. So anyway, so let's talk about Porto because there were so
Beautiful.
many people and it was so lively, and the tulips were blooming and the castles were amazing, and
Yes.
the
And then
shops
we
and the
had that,
stores
and then we had the wonderful wine spot that we were able to look over, to the other side of the city, which was such a picturesque view, sipping some wine there. That was fantastic.
Yep. And also the bridges, if you remember, were designed and or built by Mr. Eiffel, who built the Eiffel Tower. And so these gorgeous bridges that go from Porto across the river, the Douro River, to now I can't remember the name of the town, San Villa di Gaia. And so it's a different city, but it really is all together. I mean, and the food was delicious. The people were really nice. There was a really good energy. It was a casual yet slightly elegant feel about the city.
What I enjoyed was that people really spoke a lot of different languages in Porto. I'm sure, obviously, because it's a tourist location, but I found that people were speaking Italian, French, Spanish, Portuguese. So they were just more open with the languages. So this was problematic for me in particular because Paolo knows 5 different languages. So 1 minute he's talking Portuguese, the next minute it's Italian, the next minute it's French. You really have to stay on your toes around Paolo because we don't know what language we're speaking.
Well, I wish I knew the computer language more. So that's not my forte. But yes, it's a lot of fun to just listen to everybody doing, having fun and enjoying the space. I really did enjoy the Russian couple that had that cute little wine bar that we went up to. And we have these gorgeous pictures of us in front of this window looking down on the Douro River. And the wines. Okay, now you mentioned the wines earlier. The wines over there are not as manipulated. it's the grapes and then gentle interaction, let's say, with mankind, with humans.
Mm-hmm.
And then what's on the label and what's in the bottle is truly the same. And that's what I really love. Because in California, if you have a bottle that just says California Cabernet Sauvignon, it
Mm-hmm.
only needs to have 75% Cabernet, and it can have 25% anything else.
Yeah.
So that's, and now if it says Kalpana's vineyard, then it has to have 85% from that vineyard, but then it can still have 14.9% of anything else. And so you really have to know the winery, the winemaker, the vineyard manager. You have to understand what their goal is and
Yeah.
how much heart they have in it. And the Europeans seem to have a lot more heart because, let's face it, these are their grandfather's vineyards. This is their legacy. Their name is on the bottle.
It really makes a lot of sense. And you could feel that when you're there. They really care about their wine. They really care about their food. They really care about the experience that you're having. I mean, that's what Europe is so much about that gathering and food and wine and all of those things, which is wonderful. And that's probably one of my favorite experiences about it. The other thing I enjoyed was watching you. You have no fear where it comes to languages. And I saw that the most in Portugal, because I would say out of the languages that you speak, probably Portuguese is the one you know the least, right? And yet, what I loved watching was the fact that it never stopped you. You'd go right up to somebody and say, well, you could just say it in Portuguese and say, hi, how are you? And what language do you speak? And then say, oh, great. Oh, you speak that? Well, I speak this, this, and this too. And a little bit of Portuguese. And I got to the point where I was understanding a decent amount of what was going on. But I love that. I love that you do that. I think a lot of people are very intimidated by languages. Most people are. I would say I'm decent at languages, but even so, I'm not that bold that I will just go jump into a conversation. And I really realized how much I don't jump in because I know a little bit of Italian, but when I went to Italy, I was translating the whole time.
Well, when we were in the car driving around, we had our little Italian lessons, and you have a very good accent.
Oh, well, thank you. But the phrases I learned in the car really weren't helpful.
Well, we were teaching you how to say hello, how are you, my name is.
Yeah, I got that part. And then we also taught me how to say that I was very excited about this little pocket in my jacket.
Or my dog's name is Enzo.
Exactly. These were the things I learned, which were not helpful when my luggage was lost.
That was fun, wasn't it?
Anyway, so I digressed, but that was just fun.
Well, the thing, if nothing else, if I can impart, is that, okay, so you did say that we've known each other for almost a year, which is true, and I met you and one of your sons at
Yes.
this new member mixer because I was asked to go because they said, oh, Paolo, you're gregarious. You can help people navigate the app, which, surprising, Mr. Technology, I'm not, but I do know how to use the app for the University Club, and to at least let people know, take advantage of everything that the University Club has to offer.
Right.
So I was happy that they invited me, and it was really nice to go, and it was great, of course, to meet you because here we are. And it was really kind of funny about me just saying, hey, who wants to go to Europe with me? I'm leaving in 2 months. And you said, I'm going to go because somebody told me that I should be going to Europe and I'm going to be invited. And here you are inviting me. So it was kind of like kismet, it was meant to be. And I know that this is going to sound strange because of all the chaos in the world. And yet I just feel so at home in Europe. I mean, it's just the food is fresher and not full of Dow chemicals or whatever. Right. And the wine is delicious. And, the people can be sometimes just a little bit business curt, but everybody can. And yet, again, thankfully, because I do speak the languages, and, even if you don't speak the language, call me up, text me, email me. I'll teach you 10 words of the language of the country you're going to, because even if you go into one of these little teeny bars to get a coffee and get a little pincho, those little appetizer things that are delicious, even if you just say, bon dia, non falo português, right? If you say that just breaks the ice, and they're happy that you've tried,
It's true.
Yeah.
It's true. I think people want to just know that you're trying to, just exist in their world
Yes.
in whatever way that you can. And I really noticed it when I went to Italy because, first of all, I had you the whole rest of the time. So I didn't have to worry about a single language that I didn't know how to speak because you spoke all of them. And granted, I could understand what was happening, which that's a lot easier than speaking. But typically, when I go to another country, I've traveled to France quite a bit and I can get around well enough in France. I know enough French. Well, even though I've been studying Italian for, a little bit here and there for a couple of months, I found that I could understand what people said to me, depending on how slow they spoke. Some people did it slow enough, but honestly, I couldn't speak a whole lot. I mean, yes, to order something, but unfortunately, I was dealt with some complicated scenarios of my luggage didn't arrive. So that was hard. I didn't know how to do all that. So then thank God for Google Translate.
Yeah, well, you just try your best, and I know that this is going to probably sound strange, and yet I've taught the Italian language at Coronado Adult Education, and I've taught Spanish as well, and I love to share anything that I know, and just to help people, right? One of my sisters is a bigwig, and so she has a lot of her coworkers that are always going over to Europe, and so she would say, "Hey, can I give you their information and then maybe you can help them out with their trip?" So I say, sure. I email them, I ask them to send me their itinerary, and then I see that they want to go here for one night, here for 2 nights, here for one night, 10 days, and they want to go to 8 cities. So of course I rip up their whole itinerary and I say, no, you can't do that. I said, I used to live in Florence, Italy, and I always jokingly, seriously say, Florence, Italy is not going to change in 5 or 10 years. You can always go back to Europe and go to a city that you didn't go to or a country that you didn't go to. You don't have to worry about cramming it all in one trip. Now, granted, our trip was a little different because mine was for research for the cruise to find the best restaurants, to find the cute little pastry shops, to have a coffee and a pastry, to find the little towns that I want to take people to on the day trips when we're on land.
Right.
So that was different. But I tell you, my back is still not happy after two nights here, 3 nights there, 2 nights here, 3 nights there. So from now on, it's a hub and a spoke. So let's pretend like you want to go to Italy. Go to Bologna or go to Perugia, and don't go to Florence because it's very expensive and very crowded. But from these other towns that are not far away, you can easily take a train or bus in for the full day.
100%. And I think that's really the way to go. I mean, even when I went to Italy, I flew into Naples, but I didn't even stay in Naples. You mentioned going to that little town called Torre del Greco, which was darling. I loved it. And it was just so quaint and so adorable. It was minutes to Pompeii and Herculaneum and everything. So it was a perfect location. And I think that's the way to do Europe. I think too many of us want to travel to too many cities. It gets really tiring with the time changes and the going from place to place, packing up your stuff. And so I agree with you 100%. Obviously, the nature of our trip was very different, but if that's not the nature of your trip, spend time in 1 or 2 places and then really just absorb it and take day trips. That is totally the way to go.
Yep. Take a bicycle tour or rent bicycles, go for a bike ride. Sit in a cafe with a book and pretend to read and just watch the day go by while you're sipping a coffee or a glass of wine,
Exactly.
But anyway, yeah. So
it is interesting to watch people. One thing is, I actually wanted to ask you before as we go into our trip we got a little sidetracked, which is okay. But when we were in Porto, you went on a little side trip. I wanted you to talk a little bit about that before we could digress too far.
Perfectly. Well, let me tell you about a lot of the cities in Europe have an amazing public transportation system. And by far and away, the train is fantastic. And so the local train out of that gorgeous train station that I took you to, San Bento in Porto, there are trains that go to a lot of different historic and very important towns. So one day when you wanted to be in Porto by yourself, I went out and I went to Guimarães, and I also went to Braga, two different towns. I got on the train to Guimarães and I toured around, and it was cold and windy, but it was pretty. And I decided this is not a town that I need to bring my group because there's just not enough there. So then I took a bus from Guimarães to Braga, which took about 20 minutes. And it was kind of fun to be in a bus. And, you're really going through little town after little town to get to the next town. So I got to Braga, and Braga is an important town for churches and the flowers and the castle. And there's a little bit more going on there. So I'll definitely be taking the group to Braga when we're in Porto. And then we'll be going to a winery, surprise, surprise. And then we'll be coming back down to Porto. And if you remember, the Wine Box was that fabulous restaurant that we went to twice with our great server, Christian Bianchi.
Yes.
And he showed us pictures of his little son, and he's so proud of him. And anyway,
and I enjoyed that. Because I don't know that, obviously he spoke very good English, but I think it just made it nicer because you were speaking to him in Portuguese, that it just created a different sense about that whole time that we spent there.
Yeah. And if you remember the ladies that were behind you and kind of in front of me,
yes.
It was the mother and the daughter, and they were speaking Spanish. And so I heard them say something, and I laughed and I commented. And so then the mother turned around and she just fell in love with you. And she was so happy to speak Spanish with me. And we had this lovely little interaction for a few minutes.
Yeah. And those are the kind of things that I would say that are made this trip for me just very memorable, because again, I do talk to people, but again, I think it's so different when you speak to them in their native language. I felt that the connections with the people that we had, even though it was for a short period of time, was very different because of that.
Yeah, it's real people, and we're real people because we're not snobby and snotty,
Right. And I have to say that it was really nice for me, Miss Large and in charge all the time, always having to, figure everything out. I literally just didn't figure anything out. You had taken care of everything. I just kind of followed along blindly. And then it was a little shock to my system when I had to figure everything out again.
Yeah. Well, I am an Aries, so one of the traits is that we just go ahead. And if you want to come with me, great. And if you don't, you go do your thing and I'll go do mine. So
Exactly. So then after Portugal, we went off to Gijón.
And Gijón is in the northern part of Spain, and we both agree that Gijón, while it's a big city and there's some really pretty parks and people are running around doing their lives, it's not, it's kind of, I don't want to say New Jersey as opposed to New York City. but it's just,
you don't want to say New Jersey, but you did. But you did.
Sorry, New Jersey people. But the thing that I wanted to say about it is that the location is really memorable because there are so many beautiful villages and towns not far away. And so one day I went to a whole bunch of different towns on my own because you, again, wanted to spend time by yourself. You wanted to do some work as well, and that's fine. We're not joined at the hip. And so I went out and I did my research. And I went to 4 towns, and 2 of the 4 are towns that I am going to take my group to when we are in Gijón. And then you decided you did want to go on a day trip, so that I took you to Cangas de Onís, that beautiful town at the base of the Picos de Europa, which are these tall mountains like the Dolomites in northern Italy or like the Sierras here. And it was a fun day, wasn't it, to go run around?
Yeah, that was really fun. Where was the place that we had that fish? Wait, why do I not remember?
It was called Cudiero. And we went there, we had already planned, or at least I had already planned, us going there as soon as we landed at the airport in Gijón, Asturias Airport. And our luggage didn't make the flight, so we were going to have to come back anyway. They wanted us to come back the next day, but then I talked to the lady and I said, but wait a second, there's another flight later on today. Won't our luggage be on that flight? And she says, oh yeah, it will, so you can just come back later. So
thank God. That was the second. That was the first luggage episode. The
Yeah.
second one for me was much worse. But that
So,
place was adorable. The
so it was
town.
a cute little town, and we stumbled onto this little restaurant, and they were all full. I mean, I don't know if it was amazing that here we are in February and early March, and the restaurants were busy because of the Spaniards traveling,
Mm.
and some French, some Italian, but there were a lot of Spaniards everywhere,
Well, it
and
was also
Portuguese.
Carnival, right? It was
It was
Carnival.
Carnival, like Mardi Gras in New Orleans.
Mhm.
So people were on vacation like there in Europe a lot, but a little green with envy there. But so you went into one little restaurant across the way to see if they had a table, and I walked into the other one, which is called Restaurante Julio, and there was a handsome young man being the host and trying to keep everything together because the restaurant was busy. And he said, "Oh, no, no tenemos mesa." I said, "But what about right there?" And right behind him was this little bar area with a window. And he said, "Okay, sure, you can sit there." So you come back. He's setting up the little placemats for us. And then we ordered these croquetas that were out of this world. And then we had a salad, which was lovely. And then we had that great fish.
Oh my God. He brought out that fish, and I said, "Oh, there's no way I'm going to eat that." Remember that?
I'm not going to eat it all. I said, "Good." And then
And
you ate it all.
And then I ate it all.
It was called lubina, and so it was a turbot, turbot,
Mhm.
and it's a local fish there that they fish in the ocean, and it literally had been caught that morning.
It was so delicious. I
Yeah,
mean, it
yeah.
was amazing. And
And the potatoes next to it with that aioli pesto with
I'm
the
getting hungry just thinking about it. But those
and
potatoes.
oh, and the wine that we were drinking.
Yep, and the wine was delicious. So that was the thing that we were both commenting about, how simple and beautiful the food is. It's not overly presented, it's not overly flavored. It's just you have something to accentuate the flavor of the food, but it's very, very simple. Those
Mhm,
potatoes were just simple but delicious. And they had a
mhm,
little sort of sauce on it, was delicious. The fish was delicious, but you could taste the flavor of the food. The
mhm.
food is fresh. The ingredients are fresh. So there's not a lot of hiding you have to do with a lot of stuff.
Yeah,
And that's something I really, really enjoy. And I would say it's the same with the food, it's the same with the wine.
I
Simplistic,
agree.
simplistic beauty.
Yeah, yeah. And then also, if you remember, you were really actually getting pretty good about the different flavors in the different white grape varietals because I was having you try
Mhm,
Godello and
mhm.
Vino Verde and Viura. And you're saying, wow, this one I really like because it's got a full body, but it's clean and crisp and it's not too heavy and it's very refreshing. I said, yep, that's
Yes.
Godello.
I have never liked white wines. When I taste white wine here in the US, I don't even know how to explain it. Maybe you do, but there's some aftertaste that I don't enjoy. I don't know what that is, but I don't enjoy it. What is
I'm
it?
raising my hand.
Yes, what is it? What is it?
It's you obviously don't like California Chardonnay because you don't want that oakiness because oakiness gives you that kind of woody, caramelly, buttery, thicker, creamier because of malolactic fermentation as well, which is
Mhm.
a process in making wine. But yeah, the wine that we were drinking is more stainless steel,
Mm,
fermented, or in old barrels, right? Or even in cement eggs, So
really?
yeah. So
Wow.
go
Okay.
back to Hungary, and they had cement, 500 years ago, and so they're using cement eggs, or they're using these big, huge casks that only impart a teeny bit of oak. So you
Wow.
still get the freshness of the
Okay.
grape varietal.
Okay. And I just never tasted that weird aftertaste that I don't like.
Yeah.
So when I taste that, I just came up with, I don't like white wine. And then mistakenly, I also felt that it did not matter with certain foods if I just drank red wine because I don't like white wine. So I'm not going to drink the white wine with things and anyway, this was a really good experience for me because I discovered that there's certain things I don't like in white wine. Now I hope I understand better what to avoid. But it really does make a difference what you pair your food with. to
Yep.
really bring out the flavor, because Paolo showed me, I forgot what we were eating that you particularly pointed out, but
Yeah.
I tasted it with the red wine, I tasted it with the white wine, and I said, oh yeah,
Mhm.
okay, I
Yep.
understand now.
Now you understand. Yep. Yeah, it's food and wine preparation. And the food, you want to look at the protein that you're eating and or the sauce that's on top of the protein. So if you have a salmon, which is a great example because a lot of people think, oh, I'm having a salmon, so I should have white wine. Well, of course you're going to have white wine with it if it's a piccata style. So if it's with a white wine, lemon, butter, capers, that
Mhm.
would, of course, necessitate a white wine. However, what happens if you're going to have maybe it Veracruzana style with the green and black olives and with tomatoes and with some garlic and onions and with some crushed tomatoes, right?
Mhm.
And capers. Well, then you have to have a red wine with that salmon. What if
Okay.
you're going to have it with a mushroom sauce? Well, Pinot Noir goes perfectly with mushrooms. So you would have a Pinot Noir with your salmon with that mushroom sauce.
Okay. See, all these things I did not know. But it's really important because it enhances the flavor of the food. Oh, and this is something we touched on quite a bit about how Americans drink wine and how the Europeans drink wine.
Yes. And
Talked
I
about
am drinking wine like an American with no food.
right, right, but that isn't the way it's supposed to be done. I mean, this is just theatrics for the show, Paolo, right?
It's research.
Research or theatrics, one or the other. But in Europe, typically, always wine is served with some sort of food, and the wine is a complement to the food. In
It's
the
it's it's a
U.S.,
component of the
component, there we go.
experience. And
Yes, yes.
so so when I was in Bilbao and you had already left, I
Hmm.
was with my friend Nico, who's originally from Bologna but lives in Spain. Excuse me. And he even railed on me because I wanted to have a glass of white wine, but I wasn't hungry. So I ordered a glass of white wine. Says, Paolo, ma non si può fare. You can't do that. You have to have food with it. And so, of course, in Spain, you have all these little pinchos. And if you remember, those little teeny appetizers with a piece of bread and then something on top of it,
Hmm.
whether it's an anchovy with some green olives and some red bell pepper that has been fire roasted,
Yep.
and it was just so delicious, you know. And
Those
so at
were,
least you have a little food with it.
well, and those were really good in Bilbao, from what I remember specifically. I was
Oh
in
God, they were
Bilbao
everywhere.
last year.
I
Yes.
wish I could show you pictures here on this video that I took because I took so many pictures. It was
Ah.
amazing. Well, even when we went to Guernica, remember when we went to Guernica?
Hmm.
Okay, so we went to Guernica outside of, now I can't even remember. I was out of, oh no, I went to Guernica. I'm sorry, you didn't go because that's out of
Oh,
Bilbao.
well, that's right. That's right. I did not go.
We're mixing up our towns. But
Mixing up,
anyway,
there are a
so
lot.
yeah, so I went to Guernica and the array, the different, I mean, it was even more there than I had remembered in other places.
Hmm.
So, but do you remember when we went to have that fabulous bean stew and the fish that they had lightly coated and baked?
That
And
was so
then, yeah, well, that's the town of Lastres, and that's just outside of Gijón.
good. Hmm.
And I am going to be taking the group there, and we're going to be having lunch there.
Oh no.
And yeah, and so when I went there on my own, when you had your day in Gijón by yourself,
Hmm.
I met the owner. His name is Costa. Really cool guy. Probably a little tired because he's probably owned this place for 20, 25 years, and he wants to retire but can't.
Right.
And so I just went in and I ordered a cafe, cafe con leche, which is what everybody orders in Spain. And I even said, fuerte, necesito extra café fuerte, pero cortado. I still wanted it small. I didn't want
Hmm.
an American sized cup of coffee. So he gave that to me, and then immediately comes a little plate with 4 little pinchos, and they were delicious. One of them was a hard-boiled egg that had a little bit of that bacalao on top, with a little
Ooh.
bit of fish roe, and it was out of this world. And then the other 2 were with jamón serrano. I mean, how do you go wrong with some jamón? You
Right.
know.
Well,
So,
one thing I've realized is that I shouldn't have Paolo on the show if I'm even remotely hungry. Because now I'm just really hungry after you're talking about all these things.
Okay, well, talking about food again, I'm really glad that when I was in Bilbao, I had, because I was envious of you being in Italy.
Excuse me.
Yeah, we still have a little bit of a cough, I think, just from
Mhm.
traveling so much.
Mm.
But you went to Italy, so you could have real Italian pizza, and you were in Napoli. I mean, Naples or Sicily, they fight it out who invented pizza, but Napolitan pizza is amazing.
And so I didn't even have any of that, which was unfortunate. But because originally, when I got to Italy, my plan was to go to Herculaneum and Pompeii, and then also I was thinking about going to Sorrento, taking the train down to
Yeah,
Sorrento.
to the Amalfi Coast area. Yeah.
Yes, so that was the plan. That is not what happened because when I got there, I was very sick and my luggage didn't arrive. So there was a lot of time spent on where is my luggage. And this is really interesting because in the United States, our bags are tracked. You could look on your app. You could, I mean, we just take a lot for granted, I think.
I need some wine if you're going to keep talking about this.
Yeah. So anyway, thank goodness there was all this happened, and then luckily the gentleman in my Airbnb was so helpful. He was so kind, but we weren't getting anywhere. So finally, I reached out to Paolo and I said, Paolo, I don't know what's going on. I'm getting no answers about my luggage, and you put Nico on the case. Next thing you know, my luggage arrived the next day, right before I was heading out to Rome.
Yeah.
So thank God I got my luggage as a dog while I was there. But I have to tell you how lucky I was because downstairs from the Airbnb was this beautiful pastry shop, and they had these riccia. Do you know what is it?
I don't know.
It is Riccia. I'm probably not saying it correctly. Do you know what that is?
Riccia, Riccia.
Riccia. It's a pastry and it's just so buttery and flaky, and it's got some ricotta cheese inside, and oh God, deliciousness. I mean,
That could very well be something very local, very
oh, okay.
traditional.
It was delicious. So luckily
Well,
I
you
had
do like your desserts. Remember when we were in Cangas de Onís and we
yes,
had that, for better lack of a better word, it was well, they called it a pâté choux in French, or an eclair.
eclair, right.
Yeah, that was, we had to get a second one because she gave me a quarter of the first one, but that wasn't enough.
That wasn't enough. So I had to have more. Anyway, I did get on the scale today and I did gain a little weight, but whatever, it was all worth it. But so they had that pastry shop downstairs. So thank God I wasn't going to starve because I at least had pastry. And then
coffee.
And coffee, yes. Then across the street, I had to walk a little bit for the coffee. They didn't have it in that pastry shop.
Oh, okay.
Then across the street, they had the most amazing little restaurant. And, every time I went in there, it was packed, full of families. And I just really enjoyed sitting in there. I just sat in a corner because I wasn't feeling well. Just watching all the Italian families gather and enjoy their meal and talk in Italian. And it was just such a delightful experience. And then one day I went in there and but that day I wasn't feeling well at all. And then they were so full and I just took my food and went upstairs, back which was fine but the food was so delicious. And I was so grateful that at least I had delicious food and delicious pastries while I was sick and I didn't have to travel far to go figure out how to eat.
Hey, I'm speaking about food and wine and now coffee. So you had coffee in 3 different countries. I had it in 2 different countries. So what was your take on where the best coffee was?
That is a really good question. Gosh, it was, I would say all the coffees were different,
They
but
were
they were
different.
all delicious.
The 2 that I had from Portugal and Spain were different.
Yeah, they really were. Even the place where I didn't have as many Italian coffees, I have to say, because that was the time, unfortunately, I was not feeling that great.
Yeah.
So I had more coffee, I would say, in Portugal and in Gijón.
Yeah.
I think I might have liked the Portuguese coffee the best.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. No, there was just a distinct difference in the coffees and
what was your take?
how much milk they would put in.
True.
because I would always say, don't put too much milk in
Because
because
you
I
wanted
want
it más fuerte.
fuerte. And then it was funny because when I would ask, sometimes they would ask, well, which cup do you want us to use? And I'd say, use the smaller one,
Mm-hmm.
so.
So that way they
Yeah.
can't put as much milk in it.
Well, it's funny because I think that we also have the Costcoization here in the US. And so one of the things I'm going to do now is I just can't go back. I have to get better coffee beans. So I'm going to
Mhm.
splurge, and just spend more money on getting Illy or getting Lavazza. Those are the Italian ones, or
Right.
whatever else I want. But it's just, it can be even from, an importer from the US, maybe with Costa Rican, Hawaiian. I don't care. I don't care where it's from per se. I just need to have a better coffee than the, sorry, Kirkland brand Colombian coffee
Oh,
beans that I
yeah,
was
yeah.
buying.
It's funny. I used to drink that, and then I couldn't anymore. And now, I just have to have the Italian coffees. They
Yeah,
just taste better. And I just love my coffee, and I'm a little bit of a
yeah,
coffee snob, so it's
yeah.
okay.
It's okay. And I'm very blessed because I have a built-in Mila coffee system. So I
I
mean,
know.
yeah.
I love that. That thing looks cool. I haven't had coffee from there yet, but I did see it.
Yes, you did because I brought it to you, if you remember.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about that. Oh yeah, I forgot
When
about
I
that.
came to visit you in North County, I brought you
Yes, yes.
coffee and
Yes, that's right.
and
I forgot
even
about
and a
that. I
chocolate
forget.
banana cake.
Yes, that was delicious too. So, oh, and Paolo is also a quite the chef. He can cook all kinds of delicious things. That's the other thing about him that we haven't mentioned yet. I
Oh, it
did,
is food and wine.
yeah, and he does. He's thrown out a couple little ideas, recipes. I did try that asparagus you told me about
Oh, good.
with the panko, but I couldn't get the panko to stick so well on the asparagus. So we have
Yeah.
to teach you some tricks about that. But anyway, he has taught me about wine. He has taught me about food. He is teaching me some Italian. I've already decided that I'm going to start to work with him a little more frequently. I got that book, Italian for Dummies, which is not a little book like I expected. It's
And you gave me a little bit of a look, and then the look you purposefully took the look away from your face because when I said get the Italian for Dummies, and you kind of gave me a look, and I said seriously, and you went, oh, okay.
yes, but I mean, I don't know how many pages it is, but it is quite a thick
It's a
book.
thick book, yeah.
I think it's going to help me because I've been for those of you out there, if you ever do Babbel to learn a language, I have to say it's really good, but it doesn't give you the way the sentences are formed. It doesn't teach you enough about that. So I felt that there was a pretty big gap. It's really great for a lot of things because you can do it on the go and you can just learn in little chunks. I love that. But what I was having trouble because I've learned French and Spanish in a more formal, educated way, I was having trouble understanding the conjugations of the verbs and how the sentences were formed. And I needed to know those things. So for anybody who's wanting to learn Italian, I think that maybe a combination of the two, and then obviously get somebody to help you. Because the more you start to advance in the language, then you need to be conversing with somebody who speaks Italian.
Yeah,
Would you
well,
agree with that?
you and I can Zoom Italian classes whenever you want.
Yes. But would you agree with that? That's my breakdown of
Well,
things, or
also the Rosetta Stone. So
oh, that's true.
When I teach my Italian classes at the Coronado Adult Education Department on Coronado, of course, I have a lot of students that have done Babbel, have done Rosetta Stone, and what they tell me is that while both of those vehicles do help, that
Mhm.
they said you're kind of in between the two, and you're the one that kind of, like you said, explains why things are the way they are and why they fit the way they fit, which is kind of the light bulb going off to then understand the sentence,
Makes sense.
understand how the sentence is constructed and how you're saying what you want. Very quick lesson. Instead of saying, I like red wine, you
Mhm.
don't say, I like red wine. You say, red wine, it is pleasing to me.
Exactly. And those are just differences in English versus some other languages, which is important to know. But
Yeah.
we are running almost out of time, which
Oh,
that hour went by so quick. But
yeah.
I have to say, Paolo's email is down here. If you guys are interested in, going on that luxury food and wine cruise in September or any other cruises that Paolo may have available in the future,
I have two already planned for 2026.
perfect. go ahead and email him. That's the best way to contact him. And Paolo, thank you so much. Thank you so much for the wonderful trip, the wonderful experiences, and for discussing everything with the audience on Gloves Off.
Well, thanks for inviting me. And one last thing, if anybody's going to go to the grocery store and you don't know what to buy, text, call, email me in advance. Go to the grocery store, look at all those Chardonnays, tell me your price range, and I'll tell you which one to pick.
Hey, you can't beat that. You own sommelier in your back pocket, which is
there you go.
Well, thanks, Paolo. Have a great evening.
Cheers.
Well, I hope you guys enjoyed that. I certainly did. And now you got a little behind the scenes view of what behind the scenes experience of what we experienced on our trip to Europe. So next week, I'm going to be interviewing Dr. Janice Fortman. She is also a host on E360 TV with her own show. So join us next week for another episode of Gloves Off. Happy Sunday, everybody. We'll see you next week.